I just realized that my microphone was on the whole time, so those who may have been listening in, streaming via the internet, I apologize if you heard me singing. So that's probably embarrassing. Our gospel reading today comes from the Gospel of Luke, and there we read, "Some Pharisees came and said to Jesus, 'Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you.' He said to them, 'Go and tell that fox for me. Listen, I'm casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it's impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, O Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and yet you were not willing. See, your house is left to you. And I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord.'" Let us pray. The Lord, may your words only be spoken and your words only heard, and we do ask this all for your love's precious sake. Amen. Please be seated. Well, welcome back for part 2 in our sermon series, Who is God? And as we said, this week we will be considering the question of God and gender, which I think you will find interesting. But first, for those who may not have been here last week, and as a quick review for those of us who are, last week we talked about how it is that everybody worships something. It doesn't matter whether you're religious or irreligious, whether you are a believer or a non-believer, whether you're a Christian or an atheist, everybody worships something. Everybody has a God. And what we meant by that is we said everybody has something to which they entrust their heart. Everybody has something to which they give themselves, some guiding principle, something, some person that they believe will take them where they want to go in life. And so they give themselves wholeheartedly to this thing. Often that's not done consciously. Often that's sort of a subconscious dynamic. It may not be working, but it doesn't stop us from having some overarching principle, thing, person that gives shape to our life, something to which we assign ultimate worth. Might be money, might be sex, might be power, might be intellect, it might be beauty, it might be any one of a number of things. But we give ourselves to it, we entrust ourselves to it, and so we said the image of God is neither abstract or neutral. In fact, it will always shape our life, that organizing principle, that thing to which we've entrusted ourselves. It will shape your life, it will shape my life, and by extension it shapes our relationships and ultimately shapes the world. And the problem is that false gods, everybody has a God, the only choice is what God we worship. And if that God is a false God, it will always diminish and demean us, and ultimately diminish and demean the world. So there is no more important question that we could ask, not for our sakes, but for the sake of the whole world. Because the way that we get the world that we have, which is beautiful in many ways, but which is so beset by suffering in other ways, is because for too long, too many people have worshipped false gods, and religious people often chiefly among them. And today we're going to see how tragic that is, how false gods really do diminish and demean as we consider the plight of women, the situation of women in the world. And while I would hope that everyone in this room fully values the full worth of women, celebrates the gifts of women as they're brought into our community, yet in the world around us, and too often in the church, clearly that is not the case. And it is truly embarrassing to me that I have spent so much of my life unaware of statistics like the ones that I'm going to share with you. These statistics are just are heartbreaking. There's a number of statistics like this. I called out 3 that to me, again, I just think these are heartbreaking. Women make up 1/2 of the world's population, actually a little bit more than half of the world's population, but they constitute 2/3 of the world's illiterate adults. So over half the population, but more than 2/3 are the world's illiterate adults. It gets worse from there. Women work 3/4 of the world's working hours. No surprise, you all know that. But they receive only 1/10 of the world's salary. So 3/4 of the world's working hours, 1/10 of the salary, and they own only 1/100th of the planet's land. Clearly, there's a problem. And then, with their dependent children, women comprise 75% of the world's starving people and 80% of the homeless refugees. What do you do with that? And then finally, I just want to put this one because I want you to see this one in all its darkness. In no country on earth are men and women yet equal. I just want to leave that up there for a minute so you can just see that and let that sink in. In no country on earth are women and men yet equal. That'll break your heart if you think long enough. That'll bring you to tears if you dwell on that long enough. Thank you. Well, how does that happen? Well, the sad truth is, religion was often at the core of that, sort of got all that up to a start because we had certain images of God. Those images of God became structures. Those structures formed the way that we relate to each other, and very often the way that we relate to women, and they still do. And they still do. I just made a list of some of the ways that churches, even in our day and age, and some of the biggest churches, still treat women. In many churches, women are barred from governing. They simply cannot lead. And that's true of the biggest churches in our country. A mega church is defined as a church with attendance on Sunday over 2,000. The attendance over 2,000 on Sunday morning. There's only one mega church in our country that allows women to senior leadership positions. That's Willow Creek in Chicago. No other one allows women into so the mega church in this area, women aren't permitted to exercise the highest leadership levels. You draw your own conclusions on that. Of course, not just mega churches, there are also mainline denominations that do not let women give women access to governing their church. Women have there are churches in which women have no voice in articulating the church's doctrine, moral teaching, or law. There are many churches where women are banned from the pulpit and from serving behind the altar. There are many churches in which the wisdom has not been permitted to interpret the word of the gospel, and where their spirituality is not permitted to lead the church assembled in prayer. That's an incredible thing. I heard a guy on the internet this week, and I'm not sure whether this is real. That's part of the problem with the internet. How do you know what's real? He does have 5,000 friends, and your friends get cut off at 5,000, so there's a lot more people who follow him than 5,000. His wife has a blog, and on this blog there are pictures of them vacationing in Hawaii, which I can't afford, so there's got to be people that support him as well. So whether it's real or not, or whether it's just an internet gimmick I don't know. But this was what he actually said, and I suspect this may be real, and I suspect there's a lot of people that resonate with this. But he said, the Bible says, the problem with the world today is that people don't listen to the Bible. And so he said, we need to get back to old-fashioned Bible teaching. And in old-fashioned Bible teaching, the Bible teaches that women should have no authority over men. In a democracy, the people determine who's going to rule over them. So if we give women a vote, then women, in effect, are ruling over us. So women should still not be able to vote. And this is what, and I just said, what? What? So let's just be crystal clear. All right, let's leave no doubt whatsoever. God loves women every bit as much as he loves men, and God desires women's flourishing every bit as much as he desires the flourishing of men. And when we do violence against women, and by the way, you probably know this, women are subject to crimes of violence, to abuse, to prostitution, trafficking, battering, and ultimately murder at much higher rates than men are. I'll never forget the watch Wednesdays at church where we were talking about this, and we asked women who wished to stand up if they had been abused, harassed, or received unwanted attention from men that had, and virtually every single woman stood up. And I know the statistics on that, but I had never seen those statistics have a human face. When we do violence against women, whether body or word or spirit, we're committing violence against God. It's an insult to God Almighty. And when we make advances where we can really celebrate the full worth of women and receive their gifts for the beautiful gift that they are, then we are making advances in the kingdom of God. What do we pray in the Lord's Prayer? God, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In other words, God, may women be loved on earth as you love women in heaven. May the full range and richness of women's gifts be accepted here on earth as they're accepted by the God who gave women those gifts in the first place. So let's just be clear on that. And then further, let's be clear on this as well. in no credible theology of which I know, and I read a lot, I read a wide range of theologies, from conservative theologies to progressive theologies. In no credible theology of which I know does anyone believe that God is literally a male. All right? That great mystery who stands behind everything transcends gender. There's no way that being can be captured in that being's fullness by the concepts of male or female. And again, there's no credible theology of which I know, conservative or progressive, that suggests that God is literally male. God is not an infinitely ruling man. So again, let's just be clear on that, because I think a lot of people get mixed up. God is not an infinitely ruling man. And these images of God as these all-male images of God actually are rooted in culture. And they're rooted in a hierarchical culture, when the only images we have of God are simply images of God as male. That's rooted in a hierarchical culture in which women were not valued as highly as men, were they seen as having less worth, as having less dignity, less privileges. And that's where those images come from. I mean, you think about it, something that is treasured as much as the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. When God is pictured on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, what are the characteristics of God? Well, God's white, God's man, God's very well fed, he's pudgy, God's old. And why is God pictured? Because those were the most powerful people in that society. But here's the problem is when those images serve to perpetuate the thinking behind those images. And the problem is not just the individual instances where women suffer, but it's the structures that promote that suffering. And so you get these structures embedded in the church, and from the church they make their way out into the world. But God is not an infinitely ruling white man at all, or white person at all. And there was one I wanted to say. And this is very important. And this is why this is so important. Because if God is male, then male is God. All right? If all we see are male images of God, so that we think of God as male, then if God is male, then male is God. And if male is God, then of course male's going to rule, right? That's what God does. That's what males do. But in the Bible itself, in the very earliest and very oldest page of Scripture, when we're told that God created humanity in his image, what does it say? Male and female. Both are created in God's image. And if we're not clear about this, and again, this often happens on a subconscious level, and I personally would never have been aware of this. If I were not a priest and had chances to talk with lots and lots of women over the years, and if I did not have daughters. But what this does to a great many women is it alienates them from their own true source of spiritual power, because they can't find that within themselves. Because if God is male, that's not within them. And it also, it fosters that reliance on the male to rescue them. So we get the Disney stories of a princess who needs a prince to save her. The old Christian story, misunderstood, also becomes a story of women in need of a man to save them. But that's not the bigger, larger story at all. And so this is where we need to let the prophets and sages and wise people of the ages, and most of all Jesus himself, speak to us and free us from idolatry. Because seeing God wrongly is idolatry. And it has disastrous results, not just for us, but for the world in which we live. And so, for instance, when you see Jesus in today's gospel, he uses feminine imagery to help us understand spiritual things. He says, and for Christians believe that Jesus is God. So this is how Jesus himself is relating to the world. He says, I would draw you under my wing like a mother hen draws her chicks under her wing. And he's drawing on this image of God as mother, an image which we actually find in the Old Testament. And we find it in a number of different ways in the Old Testament. It refers to that primal experience we all have of security and comfort that we find in our mother's arms. But it's not just comfort and security, which we typically think of when we think of women. It's also economic justice. Because for most of the history of humanity, men were out working and women tended to the family, and there wasn't enough food or other things for a family. Most of our history, we didn't have enough. We live in a very different age in most of our history. And so the one who ensured that what families did have was distributed equally amongst all the members was the mom, right? If there's not enough food and you have a 16-year-old starving son in the family and he's got 4 little brothers and sisters, and you put the food, if nature takes its course, the 16-year-old son just, and everybody else gets the crumbs. It's the mom who says, wait a second, and make sure that everybody gets equal portions. And so the mother isn't just nurture and comfort, but it's also economic justice for everybody. And in one of the strongest images of the Bible, and the young boys that serve us like this last night, Elijah, you'll like this image. One of the strongest images of God in the Bible is found in the prophet Isaiah. And it's an image of God as a mother bear. And it's a mother bear whose children are being threatened. And God says, like a mother bear, and this is the literal translation, it will rip out the guts of the people who will threaten her young, so God desires the safety of his children. Yes, I mean, yes. Absolutely. So, you talk about a strong woman. I mean, arguably, that's the strongest image in the Bible, and it's a feminine image of God. And the image isn't on the violence, it's of the lengths to which God will go to provide for the welfare of his children. And so, championing the poor, the underserved, those who don't have full privileges, the marginalized, it becomes the image of a woman that captures that aspect of God. Now here, I need to take a little tangential trail, and I hope you'll go here with me, because I think this is so important. It's a bit tangential, but it's very, very important. And I hope it'll be clear why. So please hang with me just for a moment while we take a little bit of a tangent here. And discuss the issue of gender itself. And one of these days, we're going to just take some time, and we're all going to talk about gender a little bit more than we probably have. A lot of us, if you're my age or older, we never had to think about gender, but the world is a very different place. For most of us, we think about gender in terms of poles. And they're opposing poles. So you have masculinity on one side, and you have femininity on another side. And never shall the two meet. And so they get forced off into what's called a duality. Masculinity on one side, femininity over on the other side. And therefore, people have to make a choice between the two. And what that means for me, for instance, because I want to be a manly man, is that if tenderness is a feminine attribute, I've got to divorce that from my psyche. And all I can be is tough, because men are tough. But when I divorce tenderness from my psyche, I become cruel. And the people around me suffer. And in fact, I suffer too, because I hate myself when I get cruel. And a woman over here who has to divorce power from her psyche because she needs to be nice, because she wants to be feminine, and that's a beautiful thing, and women are nice. And so she's got to divorce power, because power, she might be perceived as a witch, but with a different letter at the start than the W. And so she divorced herself from power, and that allows men to take advantage of her. And when men take advantage of her, they're not going to like her, because men don't like people that they can take advantage of. They don't respect people they can take advantage of. And the woman hates herself, because she feels like a doormat. She feels like somebody that people just don't even see or care about, and she might not be far off. And so when we get this gender duality, it forces us to make these false decisions. And so often faith, as it's traditionally understood, forces that. There are a million different ways to be a man or to be a woman in this world. And faith should celebrate all of them, rather than being perhaps the most powerful force to enforce conformity that just doesn't fit any of us. So when we talk about God and the images of gender in God, the suspicion that most people have is that, while God might have certain feminine characteristics, in the end, God is really a man. All right, he might be a man who has certain feminine characteristics, but when all's said and done, God is still male. No, that's not true. God, again, can be as fully represented by feminine images as he can by male images. and we understand that both masculine and feminine live in the heart of God, God created male and female in his image, then we understand that masculine and feminine lives in all of our hearts as well, in your heart and in mine, and we can own both of them. And only then is there any hope for us as individuals, as a race. When we divorce them, again, it diminishes and demeans us, diminishes and demeans our relationships, and ultimately warps and misshapes the world. So that's a bit tangential, but I hope you can see how important that is. And I hope that's as helpful to you as that is to me. I mean, one of the most important spiritual questions in my life has been trying to re-own that tender side of myself that I spent so many years divorcing, beating into submission, hiding, pretending like it just wasn't there. Well, so when we understand God rightly, see, when we see who God really is, then we understand that as important as going to church might be, as important as being a part of a community of faith might be, it's not the only or perhaps even the chief thing that God expects from us. Yes, this is important. It's important because we learn here. We do see God more clearly here. And it's a focused time, like nowhere else or anything else we do. It's different than anything else we do with any other hour in a week. Yes, we come here and hopefully we're inspired and strengthened. And yes, we see people we love. I look forward to every Sunday morning because I get to see you guys. I mean, what could be better than that? But this isn't the be-all and the end-all. When we understand who God is and we see God rightly, then we understand that what God really cares about is creating a world where God's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. And real worship, though it's inspired by this, it's shaped by this, it's informed by this, real worship happens out there. It doesn't happen on an hour from Sunday morning. It happens from Monday to Saturday. That's where our real worship happens. And actually, the Bible actually teaches that. And so when we understand who God is, and we understand that what God really cares about is that we create a world unlike the world that is now. We create a world where there's at least some place where women really are equal to men, where they're fully loved for who they are, where they know that they will be celebrated and their gifts will be welcomed and lifted up and they will be held with great value. And that place is always meant to be the church, and then through the church, the world. It means it will create homes. Our wives aren't just trophies we hang on our arms, where our wives just don't help make our lives better, where we love our wives, where we celebrate our wives, where we appreciate the full richness of our wives. We create a world where our daughters experience what it is to be powerful. Basically, I'm afraid of nothing, to a fault, actually. But the reason that I'm afraid of so little is I have such a powerful sense of my own agency. Just whatever comes at me in the world, I'll figure out a way through it, or it'll kill me, and who cares about that? It's going to be one or the other. So there's not much that I'm afraid of. But one of the things that has struck me over the years, again, from being a priest and talking to so many women, is how much fear is present in women's lives. And for good reason. And so, part of what it means to see God rightly is to create a world where my daughters have the same sense of power agency that I have, where they don't have to be afraid. And so when we create this world, and instead of holding women back, we help women to flourish like we never have. Then we understand how it is that faith really energizes people. And people say, there's no higher calling. Sign me up for that. I want to be a part of that. And we understand why they think of God, why God wouldn't be seen as the cosmic killjoy. But if God has helped me to flourish in the world, has helped the women I love to flourish in the world, then God brightens my life, and I can't imagine life without God. See, instead of being the enemy who stands on the other side, what's the most important part? We understand that God's working for what I'm working for, and God becomes my best friend. So this just becomes so important. You don't know this because I never shared this, and I didn't see any reason to share it. I didn't want people to feel bad, but when we hired Ann, who is one of our priests for many years and a great help at St. Matthew's, probably the wealthiest family in our church left. But you know what? I knew that hiring Ann was the right thing to do because I knew we needed her gifts and presence and so on in this church. I knew that was important. And that's why I continue to be so thankful for Miriam, for Tracy, and for the wide range of women who exercise leadership on the highest levels of this church and offer their gifts to the mission of this church. But this family left, and I knew it was the right thing to do. It made my faith exciting, because you lose the wealthiest family in the church. Well, that definitely impacts operations. But if you're doing what you know God has called you to do, you know God's going to provide a way. And see, that just brings a reality and vitality to faith. And God did provide a way. We listened, we suffered, but God moved us ahead. And it was a beautiful thing. Well, the final thing I want to just share is something from my own heart, and this is what's happening in my own spiritual life right now. And I don't often have opportunities to share with you what's going on in my heart and my spiritual life, and I probably should do a little more of that. But this is an image of spirituality that I've only come upon in the last year. And I'm actually grateful to my older daughter for showing me this. And I never thought of spirituality in these terms. And to be frank, my spiritual life had grown a little bit dry and insipid. But understanding spiritual life like this has brought such new life to me, and frankly, such new hope. And so maybe you'll experience something like that as well. It's a poem. It's written by Adrienne Rich, and it's called Transcendental Etude. She says, "Vision begins to happen in such a life as if a woman quietly walked away from the argument and jargon in a room." And boy, if only we could walk away from the argument and jargon in our rooms. Vision begins to happen in such a life as if a woman quietly walked away from the argument and jargon in a room, and sitting down in the kitchen, began turning in her lap bits of yarn, calico, and velvet scraps, laying them out absently on the scrubbed boards in the lamplight with small rainbow-colored shells. Such a composition has nothing to do with eternity. The striving for greatness, brilliance, only the musings of a mind one with her body, experienced fingers quietly pushing dark against bright, silk against roughness, pooling the tenets of life together with no mere will to mastery, only care.